Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So we follow up Avengers Infinity War with the second Ant-Man movie, Ant-Man and the Wasp. And we start this movie off with a flashback, kind of like the first movie, where we get introduced to Janet Van Dyne, Hope's mom. And she and Hank are saying goodbye to little girl Hope to go off on a mission that got Janet stuck in the quantum realm. That we sort of learned a little bit in the first Ant-Man movie, but Hank kind of retells it again to Hope because they think that they can build a quantum tunnel to get Janet back. So that's kind of the opening of the movie. But before we get into my review, be sure to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe to the channel for more Marvel reviews. If you want to help support the channel, you can check the link in the description below. You can buy me a coffee. Alright, so let's get into my review of Ant-Man and the Wasp. So we catch up with Scott, and we learn that it's been 2 years since Civil War, and he has been on house arrest ever since because he got arrested at the end of Civil War. And we kind of see him playing games and going to a lot of extreme things to kind of have fun with Cassie because he can't leave the house. And it's kind of just a really cute scene of them in this like makeshift tunnel thing and everything. And so we catch up with Scott, and then we meet Agent Jimmy Woo from the FBI, who has been monitoring Scott, and Scott only has 3 days left on his house arrest, so Agent Woo's kind of just waiting for Scott to like trip up throughout the whole movie. And we'll meet Agent Jimmy Woo further in the MCU again. He comes back, so it's kind of a fun character here. I like the actor playing him, Randall Park. It's kind of just a fun dynamic that he has, this little cat and mouse thing with him and Scott. But then Scott ends up getting a vision of Janet as a result of him going into the quantum realm from the end of the last movie when he shrunk down. So then Hope kidnaps Scott because they need his help to get Janet back from the quantum realm. So first they need to get a part from the sort of main villain, I guess, the antagonist, Sonny Birch, who wants Hank's lab for some sort of buyer. I don't think we ever learn who the buyer is. I'm not really sure. If we do, let me know in the comments. But I know a lot of people have theories of who it is or anything, but I don't know why that is even in this movie. It doesn't have any real consequence on the outcome. So, but I do love the visual of Hank shrinking down the lab and then like rolling it off. But that doesn't seem like something you should do if you're on the run from the FBI and trying to lay low. It seems like, will people not notice a building missing? And then they're always like shrinking down cars and everything. It feels like, or is there nobody? San Francisco is a big populated city, yet nobody's like witnessing any of this. But yeah, it's okay. You kind of just go with it because we want to see things shrink down and grow bigger and everything. But we do kind of get a cool action scene with the Wasp in the restaurant against Sonny Birch's goons. And there's not really a whole lot of action in this movie. But most of the action is not super great. But I do like this opening scene in like the kitchen and stuff. That's kind of fun. And we also meet the other villain of the movie, Ghost, Ava Starr. And she has like these phasing powers. And she got a really cool costume too. And we know that Ghost will be returning in the upcoming Thunderbolts movie. And while she is kind of a cool character, she's not really a compelling villain here. But she does steal the lab, and then the trio needs to get it back from her and everything. And also, like a side thing in this, Scott, Luis, and the two friends from the first movie, they've started this security company, and Luis is the boss. And I just don't know that I believe these guys are capable of running their own security company. They just seem like kind of buffoons and just fall into luck and stuff. So it's a small side thing in this, but I don't know. So then we meet Hank's old colleague, Bill Foster, who used to work for S.H.I.E.L.D., and he was on the Project Goliath, where he grew to 21 feet, I think. And of course, they say that Scott grew to 68 feet in Civil War. By the end of this movie, he gets bigger than that. So then we do learn that Ava Ghost has been working with Bill Foster, and they have the lab because we learn that she got her powers from the result of some sort of quantum accident, and that her molecular structure is unstable and it's painful, and that's why they need the quantum tunnel to help cure her. And we also learned that she was kind of the SHIELD equivalent of like the Winter Soldier. She was like an assassin for them. It's a really good, sad backstory for the character, but she's just not really enough of a villain in this movie. So one of the problems with this movie is there's just too many antagonists. We got Sonny Birch, we got Ghost, we got the FBI after all of them, and then we're like playing hot potato with this lab, the shrunk down lab building, and Ghost steals it and then captures them, and then they escape with it, and then the FBI captures them, and then Sonny gets to the lab and they escape again, and they just keep going back and forth and back and forth, and it's kind of not really a great narrative plot. It's kind of just all over the place. And also, this movie really isn't as visually interesting as the first one. They don't really utilize the sort of shrunk down world perspective as much as I would like. But then they also don't really utilize the sort of like giant perspective as well either. I just think this movie could be visually a little bit more interesting. But they do a lot more making things bigger than they do smaller. And Scott goes super giant at the end, which is really cool and everything, but I just loved those visuals of the first movie where we're shrunk down and we're seeing things like Scott in the bathtub and running with the ants and everything. Like, those are really cool visual shots. We get some shots of him like flying on the ants, but that's not like, I want to see him interacting with the world around us. And then the cool scene at the end of the first movie, that little scene on the children's train track where it's zoomed in and it looks all epic and everything, and then you zoom out and it's just like a tiny little train. That's a funny gag. There's really nothing like that in this movie, so I think that's kind of what makes this one a little less interesting to watch, at least. But there is a cool kind of car chase scene through the streets of San Francisco, and I used to live up in the Bay Area, and I've driven around San Francisco, so it's kind of fun to see them, driving around that, and they're like shrinking down the car and everything, and yes, San Francisco does have a lot of hills in some spots, so that's a lot of fun. I think it's a cool car chase scene because this movie doesn't have a lot of great action, or hardly any action, so at least that's fun. And they got like this box full of match cars and everything that they can just shrink down and stuff, and so that's fun. And so Hank does manage to get into the quantum realm, and he does end up saving Janet, but we learn that Janet has been down there for so long, she's kind of absorbed quantum realm energy, and she can kind of like temporarily heal Ghost to relieve her of her pain and stuff. And so I think this movie doesn't have a lot of Janet. I think we're going to get a lot more stuff and learn more about her and the quantum realm in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So that's kind of one thing I like about this trilogy of movies, at least. In the first movie, we kind of just briefly mentioned the quantum realm, and Scott kind of briefly goes there. And in this movie, we talk a lot more about it. We go there a little bit and save Janet. But in the next movie, it's going to be all in the quantum realm, and we're going to learn a lot. So I think that's a good progression, that they just didn't toss us into the quantum realm. And I do like Scott's line in this where he's like, don't you guys just throw the word quantum in front of everything? And there's kind of a cool fight scene between Ghost, Scott, and Hope, like where two of them team up to fight Ghost in the end. She kind of tries to be a villain again, but ultimately the movie just doesn't do much with her being a villain. I think because they want her to still be somewhat sympathetic because of her backstory, and we're going to see her later in the Thunderbolts as more of an anti-hero. But I mean, she is kind of a cool character. They just don't really do enough with her in this. And then I think out of all of the Ant-Man costumes that we've had, I think this is my favorite of the costumes, like look-wise. Like, I really like the costume that we get from the first movie. It's kind of like a vintage motorcycle suit type of look. I did not like the costume in Civil War. There's just like some weird silver piping things, and the colors were weird. But I think this movie has the best of the Ant-Man's costumes. The one from Quantumania looks like it could be pretty cool too, but I think this movie kind of hits the right balance of a good Ant-Man costume. The colors work, the design works a little bit better. It's a little more updated than that first costume. So I really like the look of this costume, and I think the Quantumania one looks pretty good as well. I also like the Wasp costume. It's pretty okay. It seems kind of generic though. I don't like the look of the Wasp costume that we're going to get in Quantumania. But so far, it's okay here. And then also at the end, Scott grows to Giant Man in the San Francisco harbor. So he's like in the water, and they think he's like a whale and stuff. And he grows even bigger than we saw him in Civil War. So that's kind of cool. He can't hold it for very long, so he passes out, and Wasp has to save him, though. And then at one point, he kind of grows big and like uses a truck as like a scooter, which is kind of a fun visual gag. And like the whole thing of like the suit malfunctioning, I think it's supposed to be kind of funny to like, oh, he's dealing with this malfunctioning suit and he can't control the sizes. But I also think it takes away from the capableness of Scott and the functionality of the Ant-Man suit. So I don't really like that much. Although I do love Hank's line delivery when Scott hops in the van from the school and he's like, "Hiya, champ, how was school?" I've always liked Hank and Michael Douglas. I think it does a great job in this role, even though Hank is kind of like a terrible character. I think Michael Douglas handles the line deliveries like perfectly, and it makes me really like Hank as a character. I do love that line, "Hiya, champ." That's funny. So, and then the end credit scene, we get Scott goes into the quantum realm to get more energy for Ghost to heal her, and Hope and Hank and Janet are there to kind of pull him out. But while he's in there, we learn that they get dusted by Thanos' snaps. This is taking place at the same time as the end of Infinity War, and so they're not there to bring Scott back. So Scott gets stuck in the quantum realm, which of course will be resolved in Avengers Endgame, and it just kind of happens to be bad luck for Scott that all three of them got snapped. But it's a really great end credit scene that ties into the end of Infinity War and then Endgame. And so it's definitely not a wasteful end credit scene like Marvel sometimes has. I think it's a really good one. But there's one thing that I don't like. Since the first Ant-Man movie, the MCU has kind of been portraying Scott as like kind of an idiot. And like in this movie, like he doesn't even know what a wardrobe is. And even in Endgame, Nebula calls him an idiot, and he comes off kind of like too goofy and kind of incompetent at times. Whereas in the first movie, we learn that he has a master's degree in electrical engineering. You know, he broke into Hank's house all on his own, disabled the security, opened the vault. And, you know, he was very capable and competent, even though he still had that goofy side. Now he's kind of just mostly a joke, which I don't really like. Because, I just don't believe Scott and his friends run a security company. So I just wish we got to see more of Scott being able to be more competent and capable in handling things, and having and maybe using that master's degree in electrical engineering, having maybe some of the answers that Hope and Hank don't know, because they are always like putting Scott down because they're so smart and stuff. I mean, he still comes off as a really lovable dad to Cassie, which is really sweet. But I do hope Quantumania kind of fixes this and then Scott isn't really the joke as much, and he is more capable. I mean, he is going up against Kang, so I really hope that we get a better version of Scott in Quantumania, because this and Civil War and Endgame is just a little too goofy, where he just seems like he's fumbling his way through being Ant-Man instead of knowing exactly what to do in situations and be Ant-Man. Like in the first Ant-Man movie, he takes on and fights Falcon and defeats Falcon, and in this, like, he's like struggling against the FBI and Sonny Birch and Ghost and the suit that doesn't regulate properly. It just makes him a little too bumbly for me. And I mean, I know you got the great Paul Rudd in the role, and you want to use the comedy, but he can also do more than just that. So I really hope we kind of change the tone of Scott as a character in Quantumania. So overall, this movie kind of, to me, is just an okay Marvel film. I don't love it. I think there's a lot of problems with it. It is fun, though. I mean, it's not a terrible watch. It's not boring. It is kind of on the lower end of the MCU for me, though. But it still has a lot of good jokes and some fun rides and stuff. So that's it for my review of Ant-Man and the Wasp. Let me know what you guys think. Do you love it more than I do, or you hate it more than I do? I think it's just kind of an okay. It's not as good as the first movie. But go ahead and share your thoughts down in the comments below. So thank you all for watching. And until next time, it is Truth Serum. Bye.